You have accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lanterns Myron, Rumsey, and Bill Giancoli, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome back to the podcast of OA. This is episode 116. I'm Bill Giancoli, and I'm joined, as always, the guardian of the blog of OA, my friend Myron Rumsey. How are you, Myron?
I'm doing pretty good, Bill. We're right in the thick of summer here, but things are going pretty well. How about for you?
Oh, we're doing well, enjoying the sun and a lot of rain this summer, but that's okay. We're had a lot of comics to catch up on.
Yeah, we got a little bit behind. We've got some things going on with the blog that we'll mention in the news section. So we are a little bit behind in our coverage of our comics, but we're going to do a big catch-up with Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps this particular episode and do the end of the Prism of Time arc and then cover the entirety of Fracture. So we've got a lot of comic chat.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of news to be filled in there, too. A couple of shout-outs, talk a little bit about San Diego Comic-Con and what Green Lantern movie possible news, kind of hints at, and some listener feedback. So I think we should get started.
What up, dweebs? This is Guy Gardner. You're listening to the podcast of OA.
So Myron, recently we've kind of had a little bit of a sabbatical from the blog and the podcast, and a lot of that had to do with some behind-the-scenes issues with the website. Do you care to explain?
Yeah, about a month or so ago, PhotoBucket, who I've been using they're an online photo storage site. I've been using them since we started the website to host all of our third-party images, and they decided they made a business decision to no longer allow that unless you buy a special account, which costs you $400 a year. So one day I went to the blog of OA and there were no images. All the images were replaced by little meters saying, hey, we've no longer allow linking, and go here to find out more. And that's when I discovered the lovely business decision. And I'm not willing. I love my Green Lantern, but I'm not willing to pay $400 a year for image hosting. And then to compound all that, as I started looking at where else I could house the images, Blogger wouldn't allow me to edit my template anymore because my template was a third-party template. So I've had to do a lot of searching for different ideas and options, and basically we've moved the blog of OA to WordPress, and I'm hosting the site myself through a third party where I rent space. And what I have to do is I have to go back through all 7 years worth of content, 6-7 years worth of content, and redo all the images, which I had over 1,500 articles on the blog of OA, so you can imagine it's going to take me a while to go back and relink every image in every article since 2010. So what I've been doing is a little at a time chunking at it. I've downloaded all the images off of PhotoBucket, and I'm in the process of going through article by article and reinserting images and uploading them to my storage site at the same time. And I'm back. I've done about almost 2 years worth. So I'm back to 2015 at this point, which
go back in time.
Back in time, yeah. So I've got a lot of them done. The unfortunate part is that when I did the importer for Blogger, about 500 and some odd articles didn't import. So I have to go back and manually copy and paste the text for 500 articles at the end. But it's a Herculean task, but I'm in a lot better headspace now than I was when I found out that all the images are gone. Because you can go right now, the site looks very similar to the way it used to. I had to obviously choose a different template because I'm on a different blogging platform. And there are some distinct advantages because WordPress is updated more often, has more features and benefits. So I'm hoping over time it'll be a better experience for everybody. But I appreciate people who on social media kind of supported me in my frustration and were like, don't give up on it and we don't want to see the site go away. That was very encouraging to me, and so I thank people for that. And I know after doing the work I've done so far, I have the willpower to finish the task. So we'll keep plugging along. But, one of the things I want to do is I want to give out a shout out. The Raging Bullets podcast is responsible for directly for the blog of OA and indirectly for the podcast of OA. They were the first DC Comics podcast that I listened to. And I really, loved the conversation between the hosts, Sean Whalen and Jim Seguin. And they just hit a milestone of 500 episodes. I mean,
500. And for the people who don't know, these episodes aren't like little half-hour, 20-minute episodes. We're talking like 3-4 hour episodes on average.
Yeah, these guys really spend a lot of time to talk in depth about different storylines and plot lines. And I got interested in listening to the show early on, and it motivated me to do something more. And so I started the blog of OA, and then they were so nice and supportive. They invited me on the show to talk Green Lantern for several episodes, and that kind of gave me the bug. So when you came to me with the idea of doing a podcast, I was like, well, I enjoyed the experience I had. Let's continue it, doing our own show. So, I really appreciate them and what they've done over the years, and knowing what it takes to put that kind of energy in on a consistent level and put out content like these guys do, and the volume of material that they've provided just from the sheer love of comics and fandom, it really needs to be celebrated. So I really have to shout out those guys for hitting the 500 episode mark. It's quite an accomplishment.
So, Myron, we have passed the San Diego Comic-Con again, and we no real Green Lantern movie news. But we are seeing hints in the Justice League reveal trailer, where they're showing what would be called the official trailer. There's a mention of a lantern. So,
I guess I think I was among many people who were really thinking we were going to get a casting announcement. And, I feel a little bit like Ralphie looking for his decoder ring and going to the mailbox every day and not finding that decoder pin. So, once again, we kind of got skunked. But there was at least a mention of the lanterns in the 4-minute odd trailer-ish footage that they released. You can hear Steppenwolf talking, and he mentions there are no lanterns to protect the Earth. So, there's a reference, just it's the tiniest of breadcrumbs we could possibly have gotten, I think. But I guess, really. I guess you got to take the good with the bad, and just at least we know they've been acknowledged.
Maybe that's what they're gearing us up for, like the big reveal at the end or something,
Well, that's, people were like really frustrated and disappointed about it. I'm like, it'd be cool to get a casting announcement, but the other side of that coin is we're 4 months away from the Justice League movie being released, and if they want to do an end credit scene or a surprise scene where we see Abin Sur show up, because he's saying there's no lanterns, well, is that because Abin Sur was killed? And are we going to see a scene where the ring goes off and finds Hal in the closing moments of the movie or in an end credit scene? Maybe, but you would kind of ruin the plot if you just said, hey, by the way,
right.
So I think it keeps the element of surprise, and I guess I'm okay with that. The mere fact that they were mentioned, and the narrative sense it would make if Abin Sur had shown up and been killed, and it's been confirmed that supposedly there is a Green Lantern of sorts in the movie, just not one of the Earth Lanterns. It all kind of makes sense if you try to extrapolate based on what little we know. It's right. one of several possibilities. To me, it just reinforces the fact that that's probably what we're going to see happen. But, who knows?
Or we'll see, it'll be a young man going out of a bar alley and receiving a ring from a little guardian.
And he says, you'll do. No.
Yeah, you'll do. And so enough picking on Kyle, because poor Kyle, he's going to get enough of it later on. So there was some news with Tim Seeley taking over for Sam Humphries on the Green Lanterns.
Well, yeah, it was kind of not really announced, but when the solicitations came out for the October books, that was Green Lanterns issue 32 and 33. And on 32, it shows Sam Humphries as the writer, and 33, it showed Tim Seeley as the writer. And someone asked Tim Seeley on Twitter, he said, well, are you taking over writing Green Lanterns long term? And his response was, it seems so. We'll have more info soon, I'm sure. Which I guess he could be not stating the truth, and maybe it's only for a few issues, but it certainly sounds like that's the case. Now, Humphreys hasn't made any comments about it at all, as far as I know. So, I guess we'll have to wait and see, but it certainly sounds like Tim Seeley's taken over the book. And listeners of the show are certainly aware that you and I have been very critical of that series. So I'm not trying to throw gasoline on anything, but the sales of the books, in both books, are not doing as well as I think DC would have hoped. At one time, the Green Lantern franchise outsold pretty much everything but the Batman books. And right now, these books are in the low 30s, which is not good. And so I don't know whether there's some creative changes going on. Somebody actually asked Robert Venditti if he was going anywhere anytime soon, and he said he's already written into the late 30s in terms of issues. That, as far as he knows, he has no plans to go anywhere. So, we'll see. One of the more interesting comic book announcements, though, that came out was that there's going to be an Earth 1 Green Lantern graphic novel, which I'm really excited about. I don't know, Bill, have you read any of the Earth 1 books at all?
No, I have not.
So the Earth 1 graphic novels are basically a complete reimagining of characters, and so they've done a couple volumes of Batman, 2 or 3 volumes of Superman, and basically these are modern retellings without being tied down to any kind of continuity that existed in the past, but certainly not deviating so far that it's not recognizable. So this version of Green Lantern basically takes Hal Jordan and takes him from being a test pilot, which was a very glamorous and exciting career in the 1950s and 60s, and shifts him to being an astronaut, which is obviously much more 21st century. And he's working for a company called Ferris Galactic. And he discovers the power ring in some asteroid or something that he's mining for Ferris Galactic, and learns that the Manhunters totally destroyed the Green Lanterns. So this is a Hal who doesn't have a core. So Hal decides that he's going to take on this seemingly impossible task of rebuilding the Green Lantern Corps from the ground up. So it's very interesting because it sounds like there's no Guardians, there's no, obviously there's no Kilowog. So it's a familiar take on Green Lantern, but obviously leaving the door open for it to go in all kinds of directions. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited by it. I'm hoping that we get something more about it as it gets closer. Obviously, we'll see more. It's due out to come in March of 2018.
I think that does it for news, correct?
Yeah. That is all we've got for news right now. So why don't we take a quick break and we'll come back and start talking comics.
This is Van Jensen, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
Well, Bill, we've got a lot of comics to catch up on, so let's start out talking about Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps issues 19 through 21, which was the last 3 parts of Prism of Time. And I think when we left off the story, Rip Hunter had shown up and kind of collapsed, and it was like da da da, and then it goes from there. So we've got an interesting time travel story, which always they're fun, but they're also sometimes headache inducing. But what did you think about the arc where we find out that Sornik and Kyle kind of got busy?
Well, I mean, I'm just happy they're back together, honestly.
Don't get too happy.
Yeah, I know, right? No, but for these few issues, it was just nice. Well, I mean, it's interesting that Sarko comes, out of left field. I think they did a good job at explaining, what happened and where these things came from. But I think after we're done this and looking at what's to come, this was definitely a bridged arc to kind of get us into the next bigger arc. And I thought it was interesting because there was a lot of good things that did happen out of this. This was a real good core moments, and that's what I've been enjoying about Hal Jordan and the Corps. It's like these, war stories that are happening Rip from the beginning. I love how he knows John.
Yeah, I thought it was really neat that he already knew people. The ring is there for a reason. It has limited functionality, so obviously, John being forever the strategist, he's not giving Rip anything that can really cause any harm, but obviously something that's going to help him establish himself as an ally with the Green Lanterns, despite their initial suspicion. With the danger of, the ring has information about the future, which John does his best to try to protect that information from getting used, but once Kyle gets it and finds out about Sarko, we've kind of uncorked the genie in the bottle, and
right.
Now you've got yourself in a situation. And the other thing I liked was knowing what's to come. The character building that's done with Space Ape and the relationship between him and Goran's son and those kind of things, I thought that was really, really done well. The one thing I think that wasn't done well was keeping the mystery of Sarko, because you kind of knew right from the beginning, there were enough hints dropped that Sarko was going to be the love child of Soranik and Kyle. So it kind of took the punch out of it for me. I don't know. Did you piece it together before it was revealed?
I knew it was connected to Sinestro in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, he just looked too close.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just didn't know if I don't know if I was like saying Kyle and Soranaktu. I knew it was Sinestro.
Yeah, there was a comment where he talks about his father being an artful storyteller, and they emphasize the word artful in the lettering.
Oh, yeah, but I still didn't pick that up.
Oh, see,
yeah.
I look for that kind of stuff, and I'm like, oh, really? You're going to give it away? But
don't get me wrong. I also wasn't like, when they said that, I wasn't like, oh, wait, wait. I was just like, all right. But she's good. Anyways, I agree with the Space Ape and Goran's son. That relationship's really cool. It's very parallel to the Arkillo guy relationship a little bit.
You kind of know the bad things are coming because the relationship between the Sinestro Corps and the Green Lanterns is starting to work. So it can't last,
Right, exactly. And you have these and you get to see the relationship build between Soranaktu and Kyle again. It's a pretty tight arc, but ultimately it is a bridge to the bigger story. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of sad if you think about it. But what's great about this bridge too is that you got other than Guy, you don't really have Guy in there. Oh wait, Guy comes into the later issue, but
yeah, they get hurt. Yeah, and they recuperate and they come back in the fight from. They're still recuperating from their battle, so that's why they're not out front right away.
And they're just. I mean, what's great is that you just see all their personalities are coming through. Clearer and clearer, which is leading to much richer storylines that could go in a lot of different directions. And that's what I like, is John Stewart is really becoming the leader here. And later on, we even see where the changes in him, and he even gets to celebrate a little bit with himself, Yeah,
I thought that scene where he sits there and he's in quiet solitude, he's like, I did it. And he's like, oh, John, if you only knew.
Yeah, I know. And you knew. You're like, well, that's it.
It's like, sometimes like during the Jeff Johns era, Jeff would do things that would be completely surprising. But then there are times when you have stories like this where you see the writing on the wall, but it doesn't ruin the experience of living it with the characters, even though there are things going on. Like with Tomar Ray or Tomar 2 and the things that are going on here with Sarko. It's like you see the car crash coming, but you can't divert your eyes.
Right.
But the other thing I thought was interesting was the whole idea of Cataclysm and Krona's gauntlet becoming a living entity, essentially. I thought that was really cool.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I just was like, I kind of felt like I thought Sarko was going to be a better. I was a little disappointed that Sarko seemed to like not play as big of a part in this other than being bait, basically, or fuel for another fire.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'd agree. I think sometimes that's where I think Robert Venditti is a storyteller. Sometimes he has a great build-up, but it's the conclusion that doesn't always satisfy. And here, Sarko, he's built up as this big threat, but it's like, okay, Hal, you be in a bubble and that the Returner will build for you, and you just dig up this thing and break it, and problem solved. It's a little anticlimactic in that way because you're expecting something a little bit greater or something a little more dramatic.
Right.
It's like, well, let me just do this one thing and boom. It reminds me a little of, I don't want to pick on movies and stuff, but it reminds me a little bit of The Last Starfighter, which is one of my favorite movies of the 80s. And it's like there's all these ships around, but if you can take out the command ship, then the bigger threat goes away. And it was kind of that same feeling. Hal didn't really have to confront Cataclysm. He just had to break the gauntlet to snap the time loop and create a paradox.
Well, you would expect it, because he became part will at one point, and he was, affected as much as he was with this, and he's wearing the ring as part of it. You would hope that it was, there was something, either he had to defeat it some different way. I don't know. It just felt like, he rips the gauntlet apart. He doesn't seem to be really affected in any way, even though he has a connection there. And Sarko, is killed in misfire or friendly fire there?
Yeah, when Cataclysm blows up, he's kind of killed by willpower shrapnel, construct shrapnel.
Yeah.
And that is a little, it's a little let down because there's this great build up, and then it was like, oh, I guess it wasn't so bad after all. But there are really neat pieces of foretelling where you see Tomar 2 kind of hiding. He's the one that he didn't take his ring off when everybody else did, and we now know that he had to because otherwise Romat Ru's ring would probably get set free. So he's carrying the guilt and the burden of that guilt throughout, and it says a lot about his character, as we'll find out more in the Fracture arc. But it's interesting to see how they've built some of these characters up. One of the things I give Venditti a lot of credit for is you've got a book with a very large cast, and you can't get too deep in any one character because you're constantly juggling all these moving parts, but he does find time to give characters little bits and pieces that builds up the character in the minds of the reader. And I think the book benefits from being twice monthly. I think that helps as well. But you get just enough of each character that they all get serviced in some way. Unfortunately, the people that tend to get short shrifted are characters like Aricia and Kilowog, who don't, they've really shifted the background because the focus is on the 4 Earth Lanterns and the Sinestro Corps, and then sprinkled over some of these other characters, and he just doesn't quite get the same. They don't get quite the same support. Overall, though, I think that Venditti's done a really good job, and you see how the issue in the arc ends with Kyle sitting there going, gosh, Sarko was my son. He's clearly devastated by it.
Right, and again, that was kind of a tough thing that I don't know. It's like because again, we're getting into this time travel thing, and like you said, you got to hold on to your seats, people, because and this isn't the Green Lantern's first rodeo with time and everything, but he killed his future son. That still may have happened. I don't know how can he have that much of a connection, and I feel like I missed a clue as to how did Kyle pick up on that.
Kyle got the ring, and he was trying to figure out how to stop Sarko, and he says something to the ring about trying to stop that threat. He says, how do I save my friends from Sarko? And the ring targets him and Sornik Natu to kill them. And then the ring reveals the lineage.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, there you go.
That's how he got it. So he got the information point blank. Right in his face. And what proves to be his undoing is how he deals with it, which we'll talk about when we get to the Fracture arc. But overall I enjoyed it. Like you said, I think it is definitely a bridge. I do like, I liken this first year to almost like a TV season where there are plot elements that make up issues in the past that carry forward. There are a lot of little bits and pieces that it all comes together at the end.
Right.
And that to me is rewarding because Robert Venditti is a long form writer, and he's thinking about all of these elements and how do they all fit together. And I don't know. I find it to be a very enjoyable read, and I've not been disappointed really by an issue yet. I mean, certainly there are some that are better than others, but all in all, I think he's done a fantastic job balancing the cast that he has and paying as much attention as he can. I mean, like I said, there are characters that aren't getting the attention they probably deserve, but all in all, I think the book is really solid.
Oh no, absolutely. I think he's doing a great job giving them the respect to each character.
Yeah,
generally.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I think my thing is, you're a father, I'm a father. You know how you feel about your children, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know how I would feel about a child I don't even know yet.
I guess it's hard to relate to the notion of what if you found out you had a child you didn't know you had, and he shows up as an adult and he's kind of evil.
But you know, at the same time, you're kind of like, well, I could always try again. You know.
Well, the thing would be is knowing what you know. If you don't sabotage it, you have the opportunity. You have the opportunity to correct those mistakes that you might have made, because obviously something happened with Sarko during his childhood and adolescence and on into adulthood that changed his perspective, because he obviously resents his parents and the choices they made, which I guess is typical. But with such zealousness, you kind of wonder what drove that change. What changed him from probably idolizing what his mom and dad were like to wanting to destroy it all?
Well, yes. I could see there is definitely an interesting perspective, and this perspective will play a very important part with the part 2 of our comic talk. Absolutely.
So why don't we take a quick break, and we've got a listener email to share, and then we'll get into Fracture.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
So, Bill, we have a letter from Jay in New Zealand, who we read some feedback from him before, and he's got some interesting comments about the White Lanterns. So why don't you share for our listeners what Jay has to say?
Well, Jay, thank you first of all for writing to us. It's always great to have a little listener feedback. Gets spurs discussion and all that. So thank you very much. Hey guys, it's Jay from New Zealand, whose message you read out last year. Just thought I'd chime in on a couple of points for the podcast where you covered the end of Quest for Hope. You mentioned Kyle's white ring was 7 rings merged together. While Kyle did bear multiple rings of the different cores in the first couple of arcs in the New Guardians, his white ring is basically an upgraded form of the green ring he started the New Guardians title out with, between Ion, War of the Green Lanterns, and the New 52. I don't know if this is the same one Ganthet gave him all that time ago. What this means for when his white ring splits into 7 is that there are now 6 new rings, one for each of the other core, which, except for the orange ring, seek out sentient replacements. Maybe he has helped to seed a new Blue Lantern core, possibly the bit of life equation in his white ring reacting to whatever prevented Kyle from helping Saint Walker form the new rings. As to the White Lanterns, their absence is likely due to no writers being interested in following up on them. Venditti has been focusing on Hal and the rebirth of the core as well. Cullen Bunn has been busy with Sinestro and the Lost Army, while Tom Taylor, who I met earlier this year and got selfies with him as well as his signature on the Edge of Oblivion trade, continued the core, time, and Relics universe. My theory is that each new member of the White Lantern Corps has to embrace each of the 7 emotions to get access to the full power of the ring. As to the White Lanterns, their absence is likely due to no writers being interested in following up on them. Venditti has been focusing on Hal and the rebirth of the Corps, as well as Cullen Bunn has been busy with Sinestro and the Lost Army, while Tom Taylor, who I met earlier this year and got selfies with as well as his signature on the Edge of Oblivion trade, continue the core, time, and relics universe. My theory is that each new member of the White Lantern Corps has to embrace each of the 7 emotions to get access to the full power of the ring, like how Kyle originally unlocked White. If your desired core anthology book ever appears, then this would be a great way to explore the White Lantern Corps. One of you mentioned liking time travel stories. Do any of you watch Doctor Who? I'm getting serious. Day of the Dalek, John Pertwee, Third Doctor story, original and transmitted in 1972. Vibes from the Prism of Time storyline so far. In fearful day and raging night, with strong hearts full, our souls ignite. When all seems lost in the war of light, look to the stars for hope burns bright. All will be well. Well, thank you very much, Jay. I started watching Doctor Who, and I think I'm going to wait until my son's a little older, and that I'll probably really get into it with him. Doctor Who really piques my interest. I've never had the time to really sit down and watch any. Myron, you?
I don't consider myself a Doctor Who fan. I've given it a shot a few times, and it doesn't capture my it doesn't command my attention. I don't find enough interest in it to commit to watching it. I remember watching it when I was younger, back in the Tom Baker days, and it was enjoyable. But I don't know. It never grabbed a hold of me like a lot of other shows have. So I don't consider myself a Doctor Who fan. Although I do like time travel stories in general. I'm really enjoying DC's Legends of Tomorrow, which is all built around time travel. But for whatever reason, Doctor Who just never connected with me. But I love Jay's points about the White Lanterns, and thanks for correcting us about the origin of the White Lantern ring, because I forgot that part of it. I guess that's part of getting old. But I forgot that part of it, that it was originally his Kyle's green ring that turned into the white one. But it split up, and who knows what's going to happen with the White Lanterns, if anything. I kind of think they're one of those plot elements like the Templar Guardians, which are kind of just trying to forget that ever happened because they're not following up on certain things. And I guess that's just kind of the casualty of an effort like a Rebirth, where there are just certain things that don't get followed up on because that's no longer the emphasis or the focus that the publisher or the writers want to put on certain elements, especially things when they come from another writer that they're not beholden to. So, I don't know if we'll ever see the White Lantern show up again. I kind of get the impression it's not going to happen. And just like the Templar Guardians, we're moving forward with Ganthet and Sade, and we're kind of forgetting the Templars even existed. So we'll see. But Jay, thanks for the email. And if you folks want to be involved in the podcast of OA, you can send us an email through the contact form on the Blog of OA website. You can send an email to my email address, which is greenlantern@stny.rr.com, or you can leave a 30-second or so voicemail on our voicemail line at 406-POD-OA, which is 406-763-6362, and we'd love to hear from you and make you part of the show. So we'll be back in a moment, and we'll start talking about Fracture.
This is Great Moments in Online Gaming History. The day, March 13th, the year 2008, the game Halo 3. A Slayer match in the pit proved to be the setting for one of the greatest upsets in Halo history. In an open custom game hosted by Love It or Leave It, the heavily favored Chubby Chaser 37, a Brigadier Grade 3 with a skill level of 42, was hounded by the underdog Captain E, a second grade corporal with a skill level of 11 and a measly 22-inch television screen. With the score tied at 24 and only 3 seconds left on the clock, Chubby Chaser 37 closed in on Captain E with an energy sword, only to be given the sack by the spunky Spartan, who hurled a plasma grenade at the last second to score a crotch stick on Chubby Chaser 37 to win the match. When asked how he bested such a heavily ranked opponent, Captain E replied simply, he got cocky. This has been Great Moments in Online Gaming History.
So, Myron, we talked about the Prism of Time, and in the Prism of Time, we got a very short introduction to the love child of Saragnak Natu. Why do I always have trouble with her name? It's like a curse.
Say it after me, Soranik.
Soranik, not to. I keep trying to put the not to in front of Anyways, Soranik, not to. And Kyle have a love child, and this love child comes back from the future because he was a pissed off teenager, and what teenager would love to get back at their parents by going back to when they were young and screwing with them. So he does that, which then brings us to the beginning of the end of the Yellow Corps and Green Lantern Corps relationship. So, Myron, what did you think of this fracture, this arc, and leading us to the demise of this beautiful relationship?
Well, again, I think I talked about it earlier. It's like a car wreck is about to happen, and you wish you could stop it, but you can't take your eyes off of it as it happens. You kind of see it all come to play, and what I like about this is, I think I talked about it earlier, it's like watching a TV show you're really into that has long-form, season-long storytelling, and you see a lot of these elements pull back into play here. And there's a lot of little things that Robert Venditti drops in from, showing the whole thing with Guy and Arkillo and Bolfunga coming back into the picture and threatening to destroy this relationship that John has forged and put so much energy into just based on the information he's got from what Tomar 2 did. And then you've got this whole mission with Bolfunga and what led up to his capture, where Tomar 2 really doesn't do a very good job on the mission and nearly gets himself killed. And it's because he's so racked with guilt and his willpower is so distracted in trying to keep Robot Rue's ring protected that he doesn't protect himself. And then there's that whole schism between him and his partner, Phantasm, who himself was a murderer and knows what it's like to carry that burden with you forward and has seen the error of his ways. And now he's got a partner who's supposed to be better than that, who does the exact same thing. And so you see that dynamic. And I don't know, I just thought this arc was like the slow build up towards the season finale of a really good TV show, and it ended, I thought, very strongly. I was really happy about it. And one of the things I thought really elevated this entire arc was seeing Ethan Van Sciver for all 4 issues. I think that helped in terms of having a visual presentation that's consistent through all 4 issues. And I know that was a lot of work for him, but I think it pays off in the end. I think it makes the story look much more cohesive, especially if you're trying to read it in a collected edition, or you're reading all 4 parts of this arc at once. It holds up, I think, much better just for that consistency.
It absolutely looked beautiful, and this would be a great trade. And I think the trade should have a Prism of Time in it as well. I think that's key to this whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's really the that starts it all, and we get to see where again Venditti does a good job through this whole arc, really. And I really enjoyed this because you see almost like this rise and fall of John Stewart, and then rise again as like why he belongs as the leader. He puts Hal in his place a couple times. He pats himself on the back for everything working, and then it falls apart. But then he comes back again at the end there, when between the fight between Green Lanterns and Yellow Lanterns, by having a plan already in place. And I think that was just great.
Yeah, I loved the whole turning the tables on the Sinestro Corps and him putting the green impurity in their rings. I thought was just a stroke of genius. I was really like, I was caught so completely off guard. I'm like, oh, that's so cool that now that the Sinestro Corps have to live with that, like the Green Lanterns have for a long time, having the yellow impurity. It's all on them now. And John's statement that, go off, we're done, but don't cross our path and don't go back to the way you were, or we're going to come after you.
Right. And I, again, just good leadership and, fairness there of what was going on. And you get to see Sinestro. It's funny. I told you probably my only complaint, and I don't even know if I would even consider it a complaint. The one thing that I just have to kind of wrap my head around, because the storytelling is good, is just, Sornick just seems a little too upset about a child that she didn't even know, didn't raise, didn't carry for 9 months, and I don't know if I can know if that emotion has made the reaction. Now, you told me off mic, we were talking, and you were saying that you believe that there's there's bigger forces at play here.
Yeah, I think if you look at Soranik Natu, there are times when you see the Sinestro logo flashing in her eyes, and certainly when she brands Kyle in issue 25 and calls him an alley rat, I really feel like she's somehow connected to her father, that he, obviously we know now by the conclusion of that issue that Sinestro didn't die, but isn't it interesting that he doesn't show up until after she's done what she did? I honestly think that she was being influenced by Sinestro and in part by Parallax, because you remember Parallax is still bonded with Sinestro at this point. So
there's that one great scene that Ethan Van Sciver draws of Soranik standing like Sinestro with her arms folded behind her back.
Yes. It's clearly like she's subliminally posturing herself, and even Ethan Van Sciver does a great job not only in that positioning but in her face, because you can clearly see Sinestro in her face. And I just thought that was well done on his part, because she stops looking, Soranik has always looked a little less like her father, but here when she goes full on ballistic, you can see it in her face. And that's why I think that she's not reacting just as a woman who's upset that Kyle lied by omission to her. I mean, first of all, we have to talk about Kyle's reaction to this whole thing. He doesn't tell her, and she's done this autopsy. She has every right to be mad. If he thought they were going to have any kind of future together, then he needed to man up and tell her what happened, because I mean, and I guess it's easier for you and I because we're both married and we're both middle-aged. Kyle's still a young guy.
We don't have disgruntled time traveling teenagers.
Well, yeah, that too. Okay, minor point. But we have the benefit of years in solid relationships where you know that if you can't trust your partner to have that kind of a conversation, then what kind of foundation is your relationship really built on? And not to turn this into a relationship advice show, but that's that's the God's honest truth. And he doesn't do that.
I gotta sit you down for this. Our son, Sarko. Who? Sarko, our son. He came back and he accidentally got killed in battle. Okay, who is this again? No, it's Sarko, our son. We haven't had him yet. But eventually we will. Okay. Yeah.
All right. I realize that conversation is hard to have in our realm, but if we had power rings and we were space traveling and encounter all these weird sci-fi things, I don't think it'd be too hard to explain.
Absolutely. I guess my point is, it's like I don't mind the time traveling and all of that, and I don't mind all that. I just I feel it's there. It just feels like. I believe what you think is that Sinestro, there has to be a bigger thing involved, because I can't imagine her getting so upset over him not telling her that they killed their son that she never knew about. If there was a chance that he was like, you know what, maybe she'll never know. If he left him there on that planet, no one would be the wiser.
Yeah.
You know, I that's my only grudge here on what is an otherwise very good story that I enjoy, and it plays a part, but I feel like that's minor, and I think you're going to be right on the nose with there's something bigger or a connection of somehow to like Parallax and Sinestro, which I think is probably apt.
Yeah, I guess when I think about Kyle's reaction, it's a totally human reaction. He, on one hand, wants to protect this child he doesn't know. He can't just leave the body behind. But then knowing that the mother is a doctor who's probably going to figure it out and then not man up enough to tell her. It's very human, and I can't fault Venditti for telling that kind of a story because I'm not surprised in Kyle's reaction. I'm not faulting him for it, but it's very human. And unfortunately, it's a human flaw to want to protect the people you love when the truth is probably the best course of action. So,
oh yeah,
I
think, I honestly think Kyle's reaction is probably more in line and like I can believe than it's Sorenik's reaction. That it just seems like that's the hot button right there. There could have been, I could see her being upset. Like, hey, would have been nice to know the autopsy I was doing was on our future child.
Right.
So I don't know. Again, this is the issue, and we've talked about it before, that sometimes you get into with time-related stories.
I don't know. It didn't make it. I didn't think it lessened the story at all, just because of the dramatic power that was there, and I loved seeing the dynamic between Arkillo and Guy Gardner, where neither one of them would throw a punch at each other. It's like, do it first. You do it first, and
that's the beauty of this, is that all of these other, the story here, you see the relationships of we're starting to see these arcs of kind of what we talked about before. This is like this is like a military war stories, about a band of brothers, and you see the different, personality traits and how they work together. And then Space Ape and Goran's son, from their relationship all the way up to Arkillo and Guy's, to even Hal and Jon Stewart's relationship. John will let Hal kind of cut him off a little bit and give him a little free rein, but at the same time, John has enough authority and respect with Hal where he can tell Hal to be quiet.
Right, and Hal won't punch him in response.
Yeah, and Hal just understands that. Yeah, he's got to call the shots because he's ultimately, he's better at that than Hal is.
Right, and that's, I think, it shows Venditti's understanding of the characters. He's trying to find what makes these characters work and what resonates with fans, and how do I play that off in good stories. And I think that's where he's done a really good job. And I think this issue, the issue 25, really is the culmination of this entire first year of storytelling. I think even if you look back at, I remember when issue 13 came out, and it was the story of Somar Lee, and she's doing that whole talking about why the Green Lanterns are so great and how important they are, and then you get to this issue and Tomar 2 in accepting the responsibility, and you can't forget the character of this guy to be honest enough and say, I'm going to take my punishment. I'm not going to make excuses. I did it, and I've tarnished my father's legacy, and I have to pay the price for it. And then you see the ring go off and recruit Somar Lee. It suddenly takes that issue 13 that a lot of people dismissed and suddenly adds weight to it. This was something obviously Venditti knew he was building up to. So while some people may have looked at that story as filler, it really was a great way of showcasing this character before the character became important.
No, very much so. I thought of that issue when we got to that point, and I thought, wow, that's, again, we've praised Venditti before for his long form storytelling and everything, and what I appreciate about this is his ability to really add a lot of different characters you wouldn't even think of. And we were saying the core has become kind of the strength of the Green Lantern, I guess, fan base, the fact that people can like different characters, and now you're seeing these personalities being fleshed out. I mean, now even Kyle's got this scar on him.
Yeah, the branding of Kyle I thought was great, because it was almost like payback, because you remember during the Sinestro Corps War, I think it was, or was it Rebirth? I think it may have been Rebirth, when Kyle hits Sinestro and he leaves that Green Lantern logo on his back.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought this was a neat spin on that whole thing.
And then, again, plays into your theory of there might be bigger forces. And you know what I also found interesting about him getting branded by Soranik is the fact that he wanted her to change over to a green again. That was interesting. Just the dialogue and everything. It was like, I don't want you to be one of them, you know.
Right.
If you're, you know, they're fine now. Come back over to me, you know. You don't have to hang out with those losers, you know. It's like they're not losers. They're just misguided.
And I thought it was neat too that Venditti backfilled the Green Lantern Corps with characters like Space Ape and Ray Nunn and Phantasm, who decide to say, hey, you know, this experiment with being a Green Lantern and working with them, partnering with them, makes sense, and so we're gonna stick around. And so now we've got some new Green Lantern characters that we didn't know we were gonna get.
Right, and and you know, good ones.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I was thinking about the series as a whole the other day, and I was thinking, you know, I think Venditti had to split this apart. If you think about the series, how long can you balance the main 4 Earth Lanterns when you've got to share the story with the Sinestro Corps? When do you get a chance to tell other stories other than them partnering together? So I think from just a pure narrative sense, I don't think Venditti had too many options other than to split them apart. And I think it makes sense because now going forward, we know we've got a New Gods arc coming up. The Sinestro Corps can kind of fade off into the background a little bit. And that's a good thing because it allows him to tell other stories other than constantly focusing on Sinestro. And what do you think about Sinestro showing up at the end on Quord, of all places? That was pretty awesome. I have to do a true confession, though. That the image of Melissa Drac holding Sinestro, I got to see it. I got to see that several weeks ago.
Oh wow!
And I've had to hold that back for a while now. I was like, oh, okay, and I know what's coming, and you know, so that was difficult to not talk about it, but I made a promise. But it was an image I got to see in its pencil form. It was really pretty amazing. But
the crispy bacon Sinestro.
Yeah, he's absolutely extra crispy. And you know, one of the things I want to underscore too is Hal is sometimes portrayed as, you know, the cocky guy who doesn't think it through and so on. And one of the things I think is it's a little understated, but you get it through example here. He's fiercely loyal, and his loyalty to Tomar too throughout this, even though he knows his friend has done wrong. At first he can't believe it. He's in denial, which again is a very human thing to do. But when Tomar 2, it's found out that he really did do it, Hal accepts it, but he's already forgiven Tomar 2 and knows what he's got to do and why he's doing it, but he stands by him till the very end. And I don't know whether fans understand the importance of Tomar 2 and the legacy of Tomar 2. I think most people have heard of Tomar Ray.
Right.
Tomar Ray was the first Green Lantern that Hal met back in the 60s.
Oh, really?
So the Zodarians are just really important characters in the Green Lantern mythos because of what Tomar Ray represented, and that was carried forward with Tomar 2. So for a lot of people, having Tomar 2 go, I don't want to say go evil, but make a mistake of this proportion was a little hard for them to swallow, but I think it's good dramatic storytelling. You know, I think sometimes we have to have characters go through things in order to rise again, and I expect Tomar Ray will atone for, or excuse me, Tomar 2 will certainly atone for this and restore the legacy of his father. But I think that for him carries a lot of burden and a lot of weight.
So Fracture, you know, finishes out. We now see the Yellow Corps or the Sinestro Corps, the Yellow Corps. The Sinestro Corps has taken off with Soranik, you know, now, and we're thinking there might be something else, and there's Sinestro, you know, with his lover, who looks good for just all of a sudden just appearing there, whereas Sinestro is a little worse for wear. And now the Green Lanterns are kind of back in this position of kind of being on their own, but it looks like they're okay. It's not like they're worried about losing the Sinestro Lanterns.
No, and I think with John's protocol put in place, I think that kind of protects them a little bit and allows them to focus on other things. There's bigger fish to fry in the universe at this point. We know something's coming down the road, and whether that's tied to the New God story or something else that Robert Venditti has planned, we know there's this looming threat. We know St. Walker's out there somewhere, and so it's again, liken it to a season finale. It wrapped up the major plot lines, but left enough tendrils to go into the next season.
Well, it's been a long time since we've had a functioning core.
That's very true. It's a very valid point, Bill. I mean, it's been a while since we've had the group there. I mean, I'm sure they're not up to full strength yet, but they're in a lot better place than they were.
Well, they were in a lot of pockets where they were kind of together, but, not like doing what were their due diligence throughout the universe at their sectors, doing the police force work of the universe. So, this was kind of a nice, refreshing arc to bring that all back.
Absolutely. I think it was a very good job.
This is Razor, and you are listening to the blog of Oa. You need to keep listening. Otherwise, I will track you down with all of my skill, and you will feel my wrath.
So, Myron, that wraps up episode 116. We covered, I think Prism of Time and Fracture, they're considered kind of separate arcs, but I think they're one big arc, and I would like to see them as one whole trade. Overall, we think this is a great, Green Lantern core story. I don't even know if I would say I wouldn't say Hal was really ever a focus, maybe a little bit with Prism of Time, but everything was about Kyle and Sornik, and again, bringing Sinestro to the forefront in kind of a weird roundabout way.
Yeah, I think Robert Venditti paid due diligence to all the characters. I think they all had their moments to shine, and the emphasis changed from issue to issue. But all in all, I think everybody they got their opportunity to play a major part of the story. So yeah, I'm very happy with it. I think it was a great story arc.
And we had some great listener feedback on the White Lanterns. Again, I think, Jay, your guess is as good as ours. And you may be right. And some big news as far as the overhaul you did on the website, which looks great now. And we're glad to hear you're all the way back to 2015.
Yeah. I only got 5 more years to go.
Only 5 years to go.
But we'll get there. It's the older content that's obviously the more difficult. And the content, other than I said, those missing 500 articles, the content is there. There's just no images. The images are all replaced by that stupid graphic that Photobook put up. But anyway, thanks for sticking around and waiting for us to come up with a new episode, and we promise it won't be so long before we get back together again and record. And until next time, as always, keep your power ring charged, be good to each other, and make every day your brightest day. Thanks, guys. The Podcast of Oa is the official podcast of the blog of Oa and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. And Skype users can leave a voicemail on the show's account, Blog of Oa. Emails can be sent to greenlantern@stny.rr.com. And you can also find the Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa on Facebook and Google+. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.